Welcome back to a Thanksgiving Eve edition of Gators Gameday Live. I'm Seth Varnadore, joined by Bud Davis. We're here to preview Florida's game against Florida State. This used to be the biggest game of the year. I know when I was a younger man, this was the best game of the year, best rivalry in the sport. Um, not as exciting this year, not as important, but still important to Florida fans. So we'll be talking about that. But first, let's talk about some of the fallout from the Ole Miss game. We had a live post game show, and we talked through a lot of it. But just kind of having a few days to sit back. What are your thoughts? Casual Carolina Fishing jumps in early with the Go Gators.
Go
Uh,
Gators.
yeah, always a good way to start. But what are your thoughts? Kind of just having time to kind of rewatch things, look at things more. Anything really stick out to you, or anything kind of that really is pressing to you?
I think the defenses, I think just Florida's physicality overall, and I think a couple people have commented on this already. But you've just seen more clips like Pyburn, Najee Harris, like some clips of guys just smoking dudes on the other side of the ball. I don't know if we've seen Florida be that physical and dominate a team like that in a while, so that was pretty cool. And then, just being able to rattle Jackson Dart. He's a guy that you look at his numbers and they're really elite. He's a good QB. He's been in that system 3 years. He's really comfortable with it. And Florida got to him, and the Swamp got to him, and I think that's pretty impressive. So physicality, getting to Jackson Dart, I think those two things are kind of what I'm still thinking about that game and probably will stick with me. What about you, Seth?
Yeah, when you get kind of the Twitter offensive line industrial complex tweeting out clips of your games, so like Cole Kubelik,
Yeah.
Golick Jr., when those guys start tweeting out clips, multiple clips of your team, usually feel pretty good about it. Kubelik in particular, I think, spoke. I haven't listened to his show. He does a recap every week, but I know Florida's physicality. I heard him mention it in other places, but Florida's physicality is kind of one of his title of his kind of recap of the week in the SEC is part of it. So I think you hear a lot of people talking. It's just Florida kind of beat up Ole Miss in that game. And like you said, that's something that hadn't quite happened in a bit. So it's good to see. I keep kind of waiting for, when we previewed Ole Miss last week, the one reason I was pretty pessimistic is I felt like we'd seen kind of this movie before where Florida's offensive line looks pretty good against bad defenses.
Yeah.
And then when they play elite pass rushes, they struggle. I did get a caveat that LSU has some good rushers, and they held them in check the week before. But I didn't think 2 weeks in a row. But especially with the quarterback kind of not able to move too well. But for the second week in a row, good plan. Got the ball out of his hands pretty quick for the most part, and then when he didn't, he made some unbelievable plays with some dudes draped all over him that are getting the attention of NFL draft Twitter industrial complex. So you're seeing a lot of 2027 number one pick thrown around already. So that's always a fun thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Florida fans' perspective kind of is shifting after these past couple games of, do we need to move on from Billy Napier right now? Do we do this? And it's like, the important thing is we have a window with DJ Lagway.
Yeah.
We need to figure out for the 2026 season, how do we get the Florida Gators roster as good as we can for that year? And so does that mean, guys who maybe are tweeners like Caleb Banks, who you could get one more year on, or when you're doing your portal evaluations or looking at these high school recruits, it's all about figuring out how to peak in 2026 and making sure we get this Lagway window to go as high as this wave can crest and figuring that out, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's a great shift. We're in a good spot, and definitely a different spot than our opponents this week. So that's great.
Yeah. We spoke earlier in the year about the unfortunate thing at the time. This was probably post Tennessee game where it felt like a lot of the same issues kind of rose up and cost you a game. So it kind of felt like the writing was on the wall a little bit, even though they played what's probably going to be a playoff team really well. That kind of the unfortunate part of it all is that you had a lot of young guys playing really well, and a lot of young guys flash. And this is really before Lagway really kind of took over. We saw his flashes early, but he hadn't quite taken over as the full-time starter. So now with him kind of added to the mix, there was a feeling of a ton of promise, but it hadn't been put together on the field, and you hadn't gotten the results. But the last 2 weeks, you've gotten some results to go with that promise. So I think that's put most Florida fans into a much better mindset going into kind of the last game of the year and then into a bowl game. It was a winding road to get here, but we kind of got to where I think we both thought would be a pretty good spot to be if you can win this week against Florida State. And we're going to look here. Florida State, statistically, not very good.
Yeah, this is pretty bad.
Really bad statistically. So I don't know kind of the talent level, the investment level, getting up for a final game. But if you get the Florida State that Florida State's been for most of the year, this should be a game that you do pretty well in.
Yeah, I think so. But we talk about this. I feel like I say it every week. College football is weird and weird things happen. This is a game Florida State's going to play up for this game. It's at home. It's a night game. Florida is sky high right now, but we're also still pretty banged up. I think this is one that on paper, everything is screaming Florida, Florida, Florida. But then, the actual numbers, and you kind of start thinking it's like, 1 in 5 chance. It's kind of like how Florida plays Georgia and Jacksonville. There's a shot here, but there is a mismatch. But, college football, weird things happen. Florida needs to make sure we put this game away and close out this season strong because we should easily win this game.
Yeah, and I think the one game you can kind of look back to is in terms of – because you hear a lot of the Florida State people that cover the team or somewhat, closely cover a team like a Bud Elliott type guy. He's not super convinced that a lot of guys haven't kind of moved on already. But this would be kind of the game where if you're gonna give it out one more time, this would be the one. I want to go back and look at the Miami game because they played Miami somewhat close in the first half. I think it was a 17-7 first half. Miami ends up winning 36-14. So maybe you get a game like that. I think Florida State had some. If I remember correct, there was like a funky quarterback sneak that turned into like a 50-yard run or something kind of weird. But the Florida State defense at times has been all right. They played Miami a pretty good Miami offense. Looks like they played them pretty well at times, kind of held them down in the passing game, but Miami was able to run on them. So we can kind of start on the other side of the ball, though, because I think that's kind of the more interesting thing. Let's see. Tall for my height's got one. Yeah, I think this is true. I don't think there's going to be any lack of motivation. So, tall for my heights, could it be kind of a letdown game almost off these last 2 weeks? But I think this is kind of the perfect spot. Like he said here, or I guess maybe Nick Delatorre may have said that. If it was like Mississippi State or somebody else, maybe this would be a letdown spot. With it being Florida State, being close to kind of beating in the last couple of years and not having to go your way. I'm sure there's some guys on here. And I tell you what, this team doesn't seem to take too kindly to playing against former teammates on other teams. So I don't know if Richie Leonard's playing, but I'm sure that would factor into the motivation for some of these guys. So,
sheesh, yeah.
But we want to start taking a look at the Florida State offense because, like we said, defense at times has performed all right, but the offense, I think they've scored over 20 points for the first time all season last week against what was I heard a gambler that kind of has all these teams rated that the Charleston Southern's kind of a bottom tier FCS team, and Florida State it was kind of tight there for a little bit. So I'm not sure what we're looking at, but we'll throw up here. But you've got offensive success rate and offensive explosiveness, kind of for everybody. But you can see where the Noles are.
Yeah, this is just, they're not just bottom of the P5, they're bottom of FBS.
Yeah.
So they're all the way on the left, only about 1 in 3 plays are successful for them. And
I just
then,
watched this Tulsa offense live and in person last week. That's where we did the postgame show. They were terrible.
yeah,
They're a little bit worse than the Tulsa offense. So
yeah.
also, unfortunately, OC'd by Steve Spurrier Jr. So I know there's some people clamoring for that in the offseason, but
I mean, they're in a rough crowd, right? Like you're below a Utah team that is really banged up. You're below Charlotte, who just let their coach go. You're really far in the
Southern
back
Miss, who
here.
fired their head coach, Rice,
Yeah,
who fired their head coach,
Kennesaw State. You're kind
Temple,
of
who
yeah.
fired their head coach, Kennesaw State fired their head coach. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean they're with really bad company here, and it's not really like they're kind of a Charlotte where it's like, oh, they got their low success rate, but they're really explosive. They're pretty bad at both. So this is as bad of a Florida State offense as I think I previewed with advanced stats. So yeah, it's been a huge step back for them.
Yeah, and one of the issues is they haven't been able to kind of find a quarterback. So we'll go ahead
Yeah,
and it seems like they may have found their guy for the immediate future, but you did see some interesting numbers on him. But let's throw up the Florida State play calling sheet first. Kind of give a look at where they're at on here, and it's not particularly. I mean, if you're a Florida fan, you'd love to see the purple here.
yeah, this is really purple. I mean, we look like Grimace here. It's just purple all the way through. I think what's jumping out right away to me is the sacks and scrambles, 11%. That is really high. I mean, that's a bad O line. And that's a lot of sacks in there too. 21% success rate. So the majority of these are sacks, not scrambles. And then even things like pass attempts, you're under 40%. Designed runs, 40% success rate. So even when you're getting passes off, they're not succeeding. You're negative EPA overall. So that's really tough. They're running a lot of 11, not very well. They're kind of seeing the usual 6-man boxes. They're not playing well against it. Their play action, a little bit effective, but they're not really leaning on it that much. Most teams are kind of just manning them up and dominating them. Kind of an even mix of targets and not throwing the ball deep really at all. And that's probably a function of time to throw. So they're definitely having some issues.
Yeah, and I think looking at middle with Florida being a little bit more middle of the field open at times, them not seeing it as much, but their success against middle of field open is pretty terrible. This is I think I'd be hard pressed to. This is the worst offense Florida's played statistically all year, isn't it?
I think so.
Like Mississippi
Maybe
State had
Mississippi
some
State's pretty
stuff.
bad. Yeah.
They had some green in the passing game, just
Yeah.
but
The
this is pretty,
gap
and
block, the
that's what
gap
the
blocking.
interesting one to me.
Yeah.
They gave clinics on counter gap blocking schemes this year. Like that was kind of the Alex Atkins, the Mike Norvell, the run game is a big part of it. You see, it's 10% they run their run gap more than average,
Yeah.
and they're really bad at it this year. That's kind of
Horrible.
interesting, really bad, and that's a lot of that. Those outside runs will be kind of those counter plays.
I mean,
And it's really bad.
minus 0.3, minus 0.2 EPA on your run game. I mean, that's so bad. That's tackles for losses right there. That's not 1 or 2 yards right there.
So the overall success rate is 37%. The overall EPA per play is negative 0.15. So every single time they run a play,
yeah,
they're losing points.
Yeah, they're going backwards.
Yeah. So one reason for that, and then let's look at the Florida defense now, see how they stack up. I think there was one spot that seems to stack up really well for the Florida defense, and we've seen it the last few weeks in terms of being able to kind of affect the quarterback. and that matches up pretty well with what we saw from Florida State in terms of that. 11% sacks and scrambles. Florida's defense has done a really good job there. You can see 26% success rate,
Yeah,
negative 6 EPA per play there.
We've kind of turned into, especially the past few weeks where we've played so well. We're looking at as a really balanced team right now. Pretty okay against the pass, pretty okay against the runs. Probably last few weeks is to be a lot more green. But we're playing a lot more the middle of the field open, no blitz, a lot of zone, kind of hanging back, this bend don't break style that we've talked about, and then giving up more success rate in the run game. We're trading efficiency in the run game. We're going to let you get your 4, 5, 6 yard runs, but we're going to take away your 20-yard passes, and we've had a lot of success with that.
And Napier talked I think it was in this post game or Monday, he talked about being able to defend the run from a light box.
Yeah.
And so and that kind of makes me think we've been talking about it for the last few weeks now, just because of who Florida's been playing. But it seems like that might be a stylistic choice going forward against good offenses, is kind of invite them to run the football. And like you said, that running success rate is high, but you can kind of stifle teams as you get closer to the red zone, or if you get a negative play, now you're kind of out of sequence, right?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to watch. We're playing that light box. You can see the light box numbers, plus 4% there. You see that 12 personnel, it's plus 5. So, we might be seeing a little bit heavier as a response to us going lighter. And we're not really doing particularly great against 12 personnel. But again, 50% success rate, but we're basically breaking even on EPA per play. So that's a trade you want to make.
And Florida State will get in 12 personnel a little bit more than the FBS average. So that may be something you see as the 2 tight ends to try to goose their run game. But because you see here the success rate's not great against 12, but that could be a function of, okay, fine, run the football.
Yeah.
We don't want it. Will make, as soon as we get one negative play, we can get off the field, we feel like, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why you see some of these success rate numbers are kind of purple, but the EPA numbers are mostly fine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. One thing that kind of the one thing we said that's right, kind of when we flipped over here, the sacks and scrambles number, Florida being really good in terms of success rate EPA. So getting to the quarterback, we showed Florida State really bad. The starting quarterback, Luke Kromanoke. I'm gonna say, I think it's close to how you pronounce it, at least.
Sure.
Kromanoke, maybe.
Luke K.
Luke K. You found an interesting kind of stat for him when you're thinking about pressure. I know I saw a little video going on Twitter, him moving in the pocket pretty well against Charleston Southern. Now, the fact that you've got like offensive linemen being pushed back into you and you have to move around the pocket is probably not great. But this is something you found, and he's kind of sticking out here. Not the best way. He's up here in the top right corner there. Explain this to the viewers here.
Yes, this is from Notre Dame Football Analytics on Twitter, and they'll post not just Notre Dame stuff. They kind of like I do. They'll post national stuff as well. So this is one they put out, and it's some data from Pro Football Focus, and it's this time to throw and pressure to sack rate, which there is a relationship between the two. If you're holding the ball longer, you're going to get pressure, and if you're getting a lot of pressures and you have a bad pressure to sack rate, that's going to lead to more sacks. And Luke Kromenhoek is holding the ball at an absurdly long amount of time, 3.5 seconds. That is insane. And you're not exactly in great offensive company there with OU and Purdue and Boston College. So your receivers aren't getting open, so you're having to hold the ball. And then a pressure to sack rate above 40% is brutal.
It's absurd.
That is not a good conversion rate there. And you can see DJU is down. There he is. Also holding the ball a long time, but has a better pressure to sack rate. So I think the receivers and their scheme are struggling to give them quick, easy passes. And then now they're going to go with the QB who's really struggled to avoid pressures. So Florida's defense should be able to generate some havoc here, at least generate some pressure. But keep them in front of you. We don't have to get too crazy. It seems like they're going to make mistakes. Let's let them make mistakes.
Yeah. A few weeks back, Nussmeier was kind of the big before the Florida game. He was in like the 5 percentile range, which was like really good. But under like 18-ish, that's pretty good. I remember when Richardson was coming out, his pressure ratio was low. People think this is somewhat transferable to the NFL, or it has some signal.
Yeah,
right?
It does seem like it's a pretty sticky stat year to year and from college to the NFL. So
CJ Stroud, I think, had a pretty low one as well. So this is something people are looking at, the pressure to sack rate. And to be over 40% is wild. So that means
no bueno.
If you get 10 pressures, there are quite a few sacks there as well.
Yeah.
Clayton's back in. He has bragging rights. What is up, Clayton? He has bragging rights. I think he picked Florida outright last week. I hope you put it on the money line.
Yeah, and the turnovers, right?
Yes, him? I believe that. Yes, that was him as well. So
I think we're both right. I think the sacks helped.
Sack was a big one, yeah.
Sacks and the pressures helped generate the turnovers.
Clayton was 2-0 last week. So, all right, let's see. What is that kind of what you're? So when Florida's on defense, if they can pressure Luke,
it's kind of a different offense than we faced because we haven't had a chance for Florida to really be the aggressor. Is this a game where, rather than playing so passive, we do get more aggressive, kind of like maybe we were earlier in the year? We played like kind of a passive C3 against Miami. I'm trying to think of a game where we were a little bit more aggressive. Texas A&M maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is this a game where we go after the QB and maybe we take away the run game?
Maybe Tennessee might be a decent.
Yeah.
They did bring some. No, they brought some safe pressures, but I think this might be a good group to do those kind of safe pressures against. Where it looks like I'm bringing 6. I'm only bringing 4.
Yeah.
And then I can drop guys out and try to confuse the young quarterback. So this also could be one that you can kind of start out just feeling the game out, and then if your offense goes down and scores a couple times,
get after really put it away.
It's starting to snowball. All right, Clayton's got Clayton's earned this opportunity for us to put his prediction up here. It says dominant performance, more like what we did against Kentucky, score on defense.
That'd be great.
49-6.
That'd be awesome.
I hope we go 2-0 back-to-back weeks here with Clayton because he's been on it. But I think that's possibly would be great. I think there is definitely outcome in this game where Florida does kind of run away with it. So let's look at the Florida. Let's look at the Florida offense against the Florida State defense. Here's where Florida's offense is.
Those motion numbers are crazy right now.
And it'll be interesting because we're about to see Florida State is a somewhat heavy man team. So motion can be used not just for information, but to get you kind of advantages. And we'll take a look here in a little bit how Florida's done some things to kind of play against man coverage or tight coverage in the past. But what kind of sticks out to you here?
Yeah, I think Florida, both
the run game seems to be getting back to where it seems to kind of be getting even back out from – it was kind of down early in the year, right?
Yeah, success rates, efficiency is getting back there for the run game, which is good to see. This is a pretty well-balanced team, We've got a pretty successful pass game, pretty successful run game, not giving up too many sacks. That's a good offensive profile. These deep targets, 45% success rate there. That's crazy. Throwing the ball. That's the DJ Lagway effect. And these have Mertz's numbers in there too. Yeah. I think the 12 personnel still is really something that has impressed me this year and how we're using it. like you said, the run game has evened out. And then, we've kind of found a way to work successfully at handling the blitz. We've done a good job. I think kind of for this game, teasing what we know about FSU, the man numbers are a little bit interesting, that we've been kind of worse versus man,
Yeah.
slightly better versus zone. Some of that could just be charting tendencies. Good coverage tends to get charted as man a little bit more than zone does. But yeah, what about you, Seth?
Yeah, the improvement in the rushing, because that's definitely something that feels like in the last 4 weeks, that the running game feels like it's kind of back to where it was. Um, like I said, like kind of just thinking through the Ole Miss game, like the kind of thought in going into that game of, can you block them? Florida's offensive line has really been pretty good this year. I
Yeah.
know, like, the season didn't start great, but you start looking, and these aren't the be all end all, but the PFF grades for pass blocking and run blocking, they're like a top 25 unit in both, I think.
Yeah.
So
That feels right to me.
yeah, so this has been a group that I've kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop after the early season part of the season, but they seem to just be getting better and better and better. So I think this could be one where you could get Florida State coming out pretty hot early. You wear on them, and then you start to kind of run away with it a little bit. There was a Muschamp game, wasn't there, where they just kind of it was it 12, probably 2012, right, where it's kind of second half they just wore them down, and they just Florida started breaking off big run after big run after big run. That could definitely be in the cards, I think. But yeah, the deep target numbers are absurd. So those are always fun to look at. The motion number being so high is also quite humorous. Yeah, and then just kind of the target distribution and the success, just in the passing game after with some explosiveness in there. It's been good to see. The man stuff is interesting because you do have middle of the field closed, kind of a neutral in terms of, in the man is similar success rate. So let's look at Florida State to kind of see the Florida State defense, to see kind of how that lines up. And I think there is definitely.
Should we cover who the Florida State DC is right now?
You can go. You can talk about that. I'll pull up their play call. So their defensive coordinator Adam Fuller was fired. One of the worst clinics I've ever been to was his clinic.
Oh, I didn't know that. What was
Well,
that
he was he had to fill in for Norvell at this clinic. It's supposed to be all the head coaches. Norvell couldn't make it for some reason, so he filled in. I don't think he was ready, so he talked just about like movement. It's like, okay, like, why don't you talk about skating? Like, he talks about movement stuff, like drills for player movement. I was like, all right. It wasn't great. So apparently he was not a dynamic recruiter. So
they let him go, and they brought in Florida. If you are familiar enough, you might be able to look at this play sheet and kind of be like, oh, this looks like something I recognize, and it's Randy Shannon.
Yes, the man. He's been at every school in the state of. I think he's the only one he hasn't hit yet is USF. That's the last one on the punch card, and then he's good to go. So,
but this is a lot of purple too. I mean,
yeah, this was a little more surprising, especially because you hear, some of the, FSU media people or people that are in the media that are affiliated with FSU talk about, the defense, they play really hard, and they're, the defense is pretty good.
And the sacks and scrambled numbers are good.
And you come and look at this, and it's like, yes, Randy Shannon did have a stop at UCF. So I think he's been all the major ones except USF. So it's interesting. But yeah, I think their defensive line now ended up not being the best defensive line in the country, as the people were saying in the preseason. But they do have some guys that can rush the passer.
Oh wait, is this the offense or this is the defense?
Did I pull the offense back up? Oh yeah, I did. Hold on.
All right, yeah,
because it's purple, but
it's so purple, and I was like, wait, that's not.
They have been good at. Florida State has been a good sacks and scramble team defensively, I believe. Yeah, so
there it is. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, so they do have a good defensive line, but it's still, like you said, there's a lot of purple here still, a lot more than I anticipated. So What sticks out to you? Because I think the defensive line, all the stuff you heard about the defensive line, okay, that makes sense with the sacks and scramble numbers. But man, like the passing game is really bad.
Yeah, pretty good against the run. I mean, you look at it.
I hope this is true.
Interesting.
FSU because you look at these pass numbers.
And I don't know if it's telling that story. I mean, there's some I could maybe see that. So looking at this, they're bad against the pass, pretty good against the run, okay, or at least okay against the run. And they're getting their sacks and scrambles at roughly an FBS rate. So that's kind of saying something's going bad in the back end, maybe with the coverage, or somebody's taking advantage of their tendencies and has their numbers. You look at the motion numbers, and that's kind of in line with overall, and play action a little bit worse against play action. Bad covering pass attempts, extremely bad deep targets. Like, this is like every QB who's thrown against them looks like DJ. It's crazy. Like,
Yeah, 44% success rate, and I guess the lower attempt number would be they do have a decent pass rush. Is that the?
Yeah, I think that's probably how I'd interpret it. And then you go down and you see high rate of man coverage, and that's what they're good at. They're kind of that's what they figured out is they're a little bit better when they don't blitz, and they're a little bit better when they play what looks like just cover 2 man. And so that's what they're basing out of, and they're a little bit better that way. But overall, they're still not great. They've been getting torched when they blitz. They've been getting torched when they play zone, and they've been getting picked on deep. So, and then decent numbers against the run. A little bit, maybe more susceptible to the QB run or the gap blocking, but pretty good numbers there.
Yeah. So it definitely, like, if you're just looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, they probably have a pretty good front, and the back end's not great, especially maybe. And I think that it is possible that now it's still not great. Like, you look at the Whites. I was gonna say their corners may be good player. Like, they may feel like their corners. I know they thought they had pretty good corners coming into the season, but you look like the slot targets.
That slot target is brutal.
Linebackers and safeties, and that's pretty bad. So it could be a big game.
Badger Hansen.
Yeah, it could be a big DK game. Not great against tight ends. Successful, but not super explosive. Running back targets, very explosive. So interesting.
That's crazy. Yeah, I wonder if somebody must have hit a big one.
Yeah, somebody has. I can't. Maybe North Carolina.
Okay.
Did they play North Carolina? I think Hampton had a big catch against them. So, but we think probably going to get a good bit of man. So I wanted to go look at some of Florida's past man answers. Do you want to look at the radars before this or after the film?
Let's look at them after.
All right. So we're going to look at real quick a little bit of film. Some of it's from the Ole Miss game, just because Florida had a few man answers in that game. And then we can go back and look and see, okay, they've run similar stuff before when they thought they were going to get tighter coverage. Like in South Carolina, I think they felt like they were going to get tighter coverage. So there's a few examples from the South Carolina game last year. But let's go ahead and look at that. And then we'll talk through some plays we really enjoyed last week as well. So, all right, so this is the first touchdown here. Florida's got. They're going to motion out here, but they're just going to run. Basically, they're going to run. I think the motion flat, but this is basically just a snag concept, or a Y corner, I think is what the air raid guys calls it. And then basically you got a rub concept here where it's a slot fade, and then he's off there. So you can there could be a rub here. I'm guessing down here, since if they got Badger matched up on the safety, just slot fade and then the slant behind it. So if they do try to drop off under, and pass it off, then you'd have a shot here. So this is again, they run a similar concept against South Carolina last year. So you've got like a nice zone beater here, and you could even tag this. I'm not sure if they do here with kind of a snag and go. It looks like they do. So they've run this snag a few times. The first third down they ran this and ran double slant back here, so they ran that the first time down, or the first third down that Montrell Johnson was out at flex out receiver. They ran this, so now in the red zone he's going to run that. Instead of this, he's going to run the fade. So a little bit of a change up to one of their third down calls earlier in the game. What you see here, he goes, and then if it's man coverage, which Lagway knows I got the blitz, so it's man coverage, this is a great beater because it's almost a rub. If he comes super flat and that guy tries to get over the top, he's going to run into this, and then if not, you got man, if he plays it really well like here, well, now you've got one-on-one with all this room for the quarterback to throw it. And Lagway's a really good player. Badger's a good contested catch guy. So easy win. So they ran a similar look last year against South Carolina. You're going to get the snag here to the field, and now the back's going to be in the flat. And then this is more like a true rub. Instead of being like the slot fade here, this is more like a true here, and then I'm going to shuffle, go. Treat it like a true rub. So I would imagine if you're getting a ton of man, you're going to see some of this kind of thing, which you just saw last week in the red zone, but you can kind of do some rubbing. This is a look at mesh. I'm not positive. I know here, they've run this a few times where it looks like they've got mesh on and then something else behind it. I'm not sure if he's here because he's kind of out of there. So you could run it where it's running like drive almost with mesh, or he could go out and now it just becomes flood with the flat guy coming from the opposite side. So there's a few different ways they could run it. The ball gets thrown, then you can't really see which way. I think it's Boardingham kind of breaks out here, but this is a good man beater. Now Badger gets caught up here for a second, doesn't quite avoid it, which is why, if I was, advising him, maybe one more year Badger would be great for you, just to polish up the old route running. But this is a man beater. You got the two crossers there. Lagway is able to find it late, but what's great about mesh is it should be good. And these are kind of, what's funny is these are things that Florida's been running since Napier got here, and they're actually air raid staples.
Oh, yeah.
Mesh, Y corner, Y cross. These are air raid staples. And then everyone's like, oh, Callaway's here. They're running air raids. They've been running it for a while. But these are kind of tried and true, good against zone, good against man. Here's Florida running it last year. A little bit different version of it, but still mesh. But they're going to tag a corner here. And I really like this version, especially because you can, if they don't carry this in man, you can really high-low. And if it is man, you got 4 strong here. So who's covering the back? Because the back's technically the 4th receiver.
Yeah.
So Florida tries to run on 3rd and short. So who's got to run to cover the back? You get that, but then also if you look back here, if this guy tries to cheat it, now you've got your best receiver running a corner route into a ton of space. So that could be a good concept to see. This one, I made a mistake in my tweet and said we talked about it at halftime. We were just talking about it kind of right after it happened, and we talked about it after the game. But this is the unbelievable arm angle. But this is another good way. Screen can be good against man. Sometimes it's not great because you have somebody following like the back. But if you're going to get kind of 2-man or kind of off man a little bit, this is a good way to do it. You're going to get the jet motion. Will get him out of there. And now the plan was here, you get this blocked, and then you're going to bring the tackle out here for the corner. He's going to rush, which I would imagine Florida State's front will be treated a little bit like Ole Miss's front in terms of their guys that want to rush the passer. That's where they make their money. So I'm sure this could be in the play. But right here, if he
look at that arm.
Yeah, the arm angle is insane. So
it's like a shortstop.
Yeah, I thought he was spiking it in the ground when I first saw it. But if this helmet is on this side, and then you get that, this can be good against man, right? So if this is blocked, he catches it, and then great job here. Is that Barber getting
Yeah.
out and kind of getting leverage? So this thing could have gone for a big play. So screen can be in the book. It's harder, I think, throwing it to the back, just because if like you got a linebacker is got the back and man coverage, he's going to fly to him when he goes out. So like if the back goes out to the screen, linebacker's going to fly to it. It's hard for a lineman to see that, but like an off corner, it's a little bit easier because he's got to come up, and now it's not as much in space, right? The guy's got to come downhill and make a play a little bit. So here's a look at Florida ran. This is more just to look at, this can be a man beater, can be a zone beater, but Florida loves to run smash from these condensed sets. And so the big throw to DK, I thought initially, okay, he's running like he's running an out or a corner. He's making it look like flood, but it's really making it look more like this smash look here, where you've got the speed out in the corner, high low in the corner, if it's man coverage. So here you're going to get the speed out, makes it look like the high low of the corner,
cuts it back,
and then you're actually going to have, it's a great little quarters, just like Lane Kiffin kind of ran the Mills, where you pin down in front of the corner and run the post over his head. Florida does kind of the same idea. They kind of pin down in front of the safety to get him up, and then he's going to come over the top and kind of take the space that the safety should be in. So same idea as Mills, where I'm running from here to get over the top of the safety, but Florida runs it from the other side. So right there, you see the safety pinning down. DK starting to break to the corner. Then he breaks back, makes a big play. So, and then this was just a fun one. So Florida goes tackle over. So that's a tight end. That's your left guard. There's your center, right guard, right tackle, left tackle, a tight end here, and this in the motion.
That tight end, left tackle, with Hansen and Barber over there with a BCD, that's a lethal combination of those.
And Ole Miss is playing a tight front, so they're playing inside shade of the tackle. So you can kind of see, like, okay, so really, I've got from just these gaps, I've got like two guys, I've got three big dudes.
Just and the then advantage, yeah.
And then you get some play on the motion, and you're going to get like a push crack here. And if down this low, a lot of times he may lock on, so he runs with it, and you kind of end up getting two guys here blocked for the price of one. So really good job running just a little power, it looks like. And then you can kind of see it from the back here how Ole Miss was kind of misaligned, no pun intended. And then a little power play. Really good job. And that's why you get those big dudes in to block, right? So went back and tried to find, okay, what has Florida done against teams that like to play man coverage in the past? Here's Florida State. I'd imagine the structure of their defense will be similar to the last 2 years, even though the defense coordinator has been fired. But Florida pulled this one out. Motion, run the double move crosser. Almost really like make it look like that smash play. Instead of running the speed out, he's going to run almost like a bubble, but it's the same functionally. He's getting in the same space. And instead of running back that way like DK did, he's just going to run up the seam. So, and then you've got the crosser coming back behind it. So it's really flood. So it's really just the same as Florida's flood concept. We got a deep, a medium, and a short guy. So, but double move against the man coverage. They kind of went double move in the seam a little bit and ran kind of hitch seam, especially I think against one high. They like this. This is something, I think this was like Aiden. This is actually the first play they called for Aiden Warner against Georgia. It was this where you go hitch. They kind of motioned to it, I think, against Georgia, where hitch, he's up the seam, and then he's there. So if it's one high and the corner's rolled up, okay, I can take this shot to the single, which he ends up doing to Burke. Or, if the safety tries to work over the top there, you can work the seam. which is what Richardson kind of does here. Florida State, I don't know, gets in a weird rotation where they're trying to do too much, and then Richardson sees a safety, rips the seam for a touchdown there. And then just on the normal flood stuff, the stuff that can be really good against man, I like kind of this variation of it where you motion in and you run flood with the corner route. So the X is tight. So instead of being here and running the go or a post, which they like to do a lot, put him in tight, run on the corner route, and you still have the out, and then bring the receiver back across. So if it is man coverage, now I'm hiding behind the line of scrimmage, and then you have a chance to make big plays. And I don't think we have to worry about Lagway taking those shots downfield. That has not seemed to be an issue. Hosh juke is another one where you can get an empty. It's just hit seams, so you got chances to hit seams vertical down the field. Then you also have a slot that can kind of set up. He's gonna go like he's setting up, and then he'll break back to the middle of the field on the juke route. This is something that, like, the Patriots,
Tony,
Kadarius Toney did, and the Patriots made a living on it with Brady and Edelman, and I think they ran it down the field. Like, there's one game, it may have even been one of the Super Bowls, they ran Hosh juke, and Brady threw it to like 4 different guys on it, but they just kept running it over and over and over again, and he ended up hitting a different guy kind of every rep of it. So you saw that against South Carolina last year. They ran it against Kentucky in Napier's first year, where if you feel like you're going to get man, the juke route. So you could see some of this. And then this is the other thing that, like, I know people have talked about kind of attaching easy throws to some of the run game, because Ole Miss attached a ton of easy throws to the run game. Florida likes to attach verticals. So if you do get man, the safeties are nosing the run game, you can throw kind of the fades or the goes on this. This is Richardson against Texas A&M, great catch, right? But Lagway likes to do this as well. This is against LSU. This is called run play. You see here, they've got verticals outside. They got hitches here. So the safety is off, like Florida was playing off. You can take the hitches here. They also got that, but then it's a run play. So right here, safety just stays there. He knows, okay, I really got one-on-one outside. If I can just make a good throw out there, which he does, and Badger wins early, you got a chance to make plays down the field. So I think you'll see some of that on the run play. Those will be attached. And then this is the favorite that Florida did, kind of the change-up on against LSU, which probably wouldn't be another good man beater, but this one's tough. Because you see here, you get this guy running across, and then you can kind of get safeties caught up, or safeties having to guard backers. So
it's just deep mesh.
Basically, yeah. And then this was another, Y cross kind of. This is something they've done a bunch in the past, where they're running basically Y cross, but they're bringing. This is probably a staple play, I think, for Napier, where they're running kind of their white version of Y cross, but they're bringing both crossers from the opposite side, so deeper in a medium, or the medium guy and the short guy. And so if you do get blitz or man, you can just drop it off to a guy on the run and let him make a play. So those are the things kind of I think you may see. But who knows? That's kind of the worry, right? If Florida State can play man coverage and load up the box, and you can't beat the man coverage, well, now that's when you get into kind of a tighter game. But I think Florida's got enough in the arsenal to beat it, and they've got the quarterback.
And I think you bring up that I forgot about that South Carolina game last year, where like that's what South Carolina did is they manned up and they said, hey, beat us through the air, and we smoked them.
Yeah,
that's I think the most man anybody has played is probably in the Napier era, and that was a crushing passing success game. People thought we were calling new plays. It was such a success.
And if you go back to the first FSU game with Richardson, like he played pretty bad in the second half, but like Florida had guys running open a ton in that game too, and that was the game where Florida goes into it down like 3 or 4 of their starting receivers and was running guys out there that weren't going to play much or hadn't played much on the year. So I think they had a decent beat on what Florida State was doing. So if it's similar, I haven't watched a ton of them, but I think they might have a good beat on what they do. So
I am not worried about a Randy Shannon defense.
yeah, you could just say that.
I think we should be fine there, barring some huge unforeseen circumstance. All right, so I know
What do you
Napier
think?
ain't usually this coach, but I feel like this is a score that needs to be run up. Oh,
You think he would? You think he would? I mean, I think in terms of, in terms of like, you know, you're still recruiting some of their guys. You know, you had their top commit say that he thinks Florida could win a national championship with DJ Lagway, who's going to be on campus there. Like,
I think if you're smart, you run up the score.
right? If you can, you have to, right? Like, you want to talk about like positive momentum, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that has not seemed to be Napier's track record. It's mostly the games in hand. We're just going to kind of do what we need to do and get out of here. But
and some of that's his, complimentary football philosophy to shorten the game. He likes a short game, but yeah, I'd love a blowout. What did Clay have it at? 49-6?
49-6. That'd be lovely. I think this is one. Now Florida State's they've kind of played below expectations all year. So if they play their best game, they still have some talent on the team. But this is a game that I think you could see it really snowball for Florida if Florida's able to get turnovers and kind of consistently generate pressure,
run the ball,
and then basically, how much does FSU have to play for at that point? Like, it seems like a lot of their guys are going pro or hitting the portal after the season. So that is the other thing, just off topic, but with so much transferring now, and especially this place like FSU where you've really turned the roster over a ton and then you lost a bunch of guys, how much do you really care about this game if you're a Florida State player? If you've been on the roster for a year, like, does this game matter to you at all?
I think it's tough. And
Florida's returning like a bunch of guys from the past 2 or 3 years. Like, there's guys that have been at Florida for a long time. Florida State turned it over so much. Like,
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think Florida, you can look at transfer numbers. We're pretty high up there as well. Which, new coaches, it's not that unexpected. If you've changed coaches since 2021, you're going to be up there. I think Florida has clearly done a good job of establishing a culture. It surprised me, I think, seeing how much these guys have fought, more than I certainly expected. We were talking post Tennessee. Where does Florida go from here? Would have been very easy to check out. Like, guys like Badger, guys like Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, like, they don't have a ton of like experience or built-in loyalty to this program, and they're out there playing extremely hard. Gumps, like, Banks is a transfer. Like, there are a significant amount of transfers on this roster that have bought in, and I think that's pretty neat. And I think it's about finding the balance. You need to use the portal so that you hit that number of elite guys you need every year, which for Florida is probably somewhere 10 to 16. We got to have 5 or 6 guys on both sides of the ball that look like they can play on Sundays. We're not quite there, but we're getting closer. And FSU, they've got guys who have checked out. They have not bought in. They kind of have lost that culture. And I think it was probably a mistake to fire assistants mid-year. I don't think that's really a good move anymore with the portal.
I don't think it helps, really. I mean, just you needed some blood, so I don't know. All right, we wanted to end towards the end here, looking at the FSU stat radars from Game on Paper.
Yeah, this is a shout out Brandon Olson for tipping me off to how absurd these look.
So further out is better.
Yeah.
So if this was one big circle, it'd be a great offense.
Yep. Where you're looking at like 20 stats, and you want this to look like a circle where they all go to the edge, and almost all like like they have 6 stats that basically aren't collapsed to the worst in the country, which is crazy. And all of those are, I mean, those are explosiveness stats. So that's really kind of like if you filter for good plays, how good were they? So, those ones it's hard to be really bad at because you're competing with option teams. But man, this is brutal.
It's pretty bad there.
Like the average distance on third down is like worst in the country.
Yeah, they're pretty terrible. So I want to, and then like I said, it looks like it was like a bit of a looks like a puckered lip on, like somebody just ate something sour. You'd like for it to look a little bit more wide open. Defensively, you see the passing is very low.
Yeah.
Passing success rate not great. There's some, and this is a lot of some of the stuff percentage, the line yards. I think some of that is more like, you can attribute it to a decent front, right?
Yep, exactly. So a little bit better here, but still not great. So I just think, shout out Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators. I think I put out a call for like, give me some embarrassing FSU stats. And he was like, you got to check out the game on paper ones for FSU.
All right, so now this is what we need right here. Zach's not messing around.
The over of 75.
This is Clayton.
Like two
49-6 is child's play. 72-3. 72-3 might get Napier an extension. The fan base would be so giddy, I think. Just for reference, so we see I just want to show, in case you're wondering, okay, what does like the best offense in the country look like? Here's FSU. So on game on paper, Miami is the best offense in the country. So maybe that game wasn't as bad as we thought. Here's what theirs looks like. It's a little bit different.
It's a lily pad. Yeah.
Yeah. Florida State's was not great. Miami's defense, much better. So yeah, it's got to be the worst. I mean, the worst Florida State duo. That's a good question. If it was the 72-3 that Zach is hoping for,
his buyout is it 60? It's like 64. I don't think it's doable.
I think some of those. They might have to plant something on him or something. It could get pretty hairy there for him.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. We don't want to get him fired. We want him to hang around. So maybe Napier should keep this close.
Yeah, sell him, and it's little hope into the offseason there, but not too close because you do want to steal that 5-star offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think something like 32-14, 32-17, something like that would be good.
Good shout from JP here. Florida did start running duo in the second half of that first matchup, and I think we might see a little bit of that as well. So I think it could be a game where it's somewhat tight, and then Florida once Florida can establish with a bit of a lead, the run game can kind of really get going and put it away. So should be duo the run play is what he's talking about. It's almost like it's just like a downhill. It's like you're running power, but you're not pulling anybody. So really downhill, the back can kind of hit it up inside or bounce it. It's kind of just a real smash mouth play. Florida just started to run it right at Florida State in the second half of that game, and were able to kind of move it. And that, if you remember that game, that's the one where Florida was running it really well. Richardson would pull some on these RPOs and throw it, and so you ended up getting a lot of Richardson throws when he was really off in the second half, and that kind of brought the game back down a little bit for Florida, but they were able to run the ball really well. So, and that was a pretty good FSU front. I don't think they're quite as good this year. So
no, I think Florida's better, on both sides of the ball, in the trenches, skill positions, quarterback, coaching. We should win this game handedly. Only worry, night game, college football rivalry night, but I still think Florida by 2 touchdowns, maybe more.
Hopefully we can get a cut to the guy reading the book in the stands again. That's always a winner. All right, so Clayton's in for 49-6. Zach is in. I guess Century's in for 45-10, maybe 17 with the gates out. Zach is in for 72-3. put your score prediction in the comments. Let's see let us know your score prediction. Bud, do you have a score prediction?
I think I'll go 31-14 Florida. Yeah. I think that sounds right.
31, 31-20.
Somewhere in there.
I think that's kind of in a good range. I think you can get to 31. I know this FSU offense is bad. I think they could still, they still got guys that you can get an explosive play here or there. So I wouldn't be shocked if they scored a couple times. But the way Florida's been playing defense, if they kind of keep that same structure, they probably won't score a ton. So yeah, 31. I think 31-14 is kind of in a good range. But would love to see one of these other scores. Would love to see Zach's scores, but I'd be happy with Clayton's. So we'll see. All right, we'll see you guys maybe next week to kind of review hopefully a big win going into off season. And we may have, I guess next week we wouldn't quite know bowl games yet. So we'll see. Maybe next week, maybe kind of hold it and kind of go over it, kind of season in totality. But I will be back to review this game, review the season, take a look at the bowl game. In the meantime, have a happy Thanksgiving and go Gators.
Happy Thanksgiving. Go Gators.